Okay, Wikileaks has released the Hillary Clinton transcripts, and we just finished the show, and so I'm shooting this so that you guys get it immediately. And boy, there's a lot in here, and I'm going to share it with you guys as much as possible. So, there's some stuff that's overhyped. There's some stuff that's pretty bad. I'm going to say the worst for the end. As I looked at this, she said that she was going to look into releasing these transcripts of her paid speeches to Goldman Sachs and other companies before. She was still looking into it when WikiLeaks released these today. You should have just released them, and especially now that I've seen them. Yes, some of it is bad, right? But you would have survived, and you would have been much better off just being honest. Saying, yeah, I'm a moderate. That's what I am, okay? I'm not going to pretend to be progressive. Fine, Bernie's more progressive than me. That's what you should have said, okay? You'll see she's all throughout here. Moderate, little center right, little center left. Okay, I'll give you all the details. And WikiLeaks and whoever else, however they got it, it's super frustrating. Why didn't you release this during the primaries? I knew they were going to release them in the general, and here we are in the general. All right, anyway. But let me get to the substance of it, okay? So, I'll go with not some bad, some that have been misinterpreted, and then the worst parts at the end, like I said. Okay, so she says in one part, when she's talking to Goldman and BlackRock, she says, and now obviously I'm kind of far removed because of the life I've lived and the economic, fortunes that my husband and I now enjoy. Now, most people are stopping it there when they're quoting it out of context, but she ends that sentence by saying, but I haven't forgotten it. And when you read the intro into all that, all she's saying is she talks about how she grew up poor to middle class and she remembers that struggle. And she says, now we're doing pretty okay, but I still remember that. That's a total pass. That's not a thing that's a problem. There are problems later. That's not among them, okay? Then one of the ones that everybody's focusing on, rightfully so, is she says, so you need both a public and a private position. And so that seems hypocritical. It's a mixed bag. Let me give you the whole quote, though, in context. She says, I mean, politics is like sausage being made. It's unsavory, and it's always been that way, but we usually end up where we need to be. But if everybody's watching, all of the backroom discussions and deals, then people get a little nervous, to say the least. So you need both a public and a private position. This is, look, people might get mad, but this is half true, right? So people want to do, like, backroom stuff in front of everybody. That's not how it works, right? So I remember when Obama said, oh, maybe we'll negotiate Obamacare in public. I was like, no, you're not going to do that. Because at some point you got to make a deal. And when you go to make a deal, you need to compromise. And people get punished for compromising, right? So I half get what she's saying about making of the sausage. But the other half is too true for Hillary Clinton. She has too many public positions and private positions. She's internalized that so much that it's become a way of operating for her. And when it gets to be, hey, here's my public positions and here's my private positions, that's why people get mad. That's why you lose their trust. That's why you score so low on that trust question. Okay? So mixed bag there. Now, let's go to one's about her positions on policy. Okay? So she says about on trade. She says, my dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders sometime in the future with energy that is as green and sustainable as we can get it, powering growth and opportunity for every person in the hemisphere. So this is a classic Hillary Clinton moderate position, right? So you can look at that and go, aha, I knew she's for the TPP. Now, she didn't say that, and she did talk about sustainable energy. Now, I do think she's going to eventually be for the TPP if it's not covered in the lame duck session for other reasons. This sentence leads you to believe, well, she's gonna in her mind be a moderate and try to do trade deals, but at least make them green and sustainable, etc. Okay, so I view that on the less problematic part. Then there are her policy positions that really annoyed me. She's talks smack about Edward Snowden. Super annoying to me. Okay, she's not in favor of him, but we already knew that. She speaks very favorably of Simpson Bowles. Simpson Bowles was the grand bargain. I hated the grand bargain. They think these so-called moderate centrists, that's how they paint themselves. I would say in that case, corporatist is a little bit more accurate. They genuinely believe, like, wait a minute, you guys are uncompromising. No, I just told you I don't mind compromise. I get that we got to make a deal, but part of the Simpson Bowles deal was cutting Social Security. No, there are some deals that are not good, and I don't want to make. I don't want to compromise with insane radical right wingers and give away some parts of Social Security. And as it turns out, they were so radical right wing, they didn't even take that deal. Anyway, I'm glad they didn't. But President Obama wanted to take the deal. Now we know that Hillary Clinton wanted to take the deal, and if she's president, she's going to want to do that grand bargain again. So buyer beware. She likely does not mind, as Simpson Bowles said, to cut Social Security to some degree. Now they claim they're also going to increase taxes, etc. Whether I fully believe that's a different story, but just know, don't get surprised by it, okay? Now, back to stuff that is getting worse and worse, okay? Let's go to, I've got all these, oh yes. Now, this is my most important issue. I think it's the most important issue in the country. The one that probably annoyed me the most, but I have it in the middle because I think the other stuff is a little bit more telling. She talks about campaign finance from. Not really. She talks about it in the context of like, oh, we have to spend so long on the campaigns, and we have to raise so much money. She talked about how she raised $250 million in 2008. That was crazy. Obama raised $1.1 billion in his last run. That was crazy, right? Then she says, quote, I would like it not to be so expensive. I have no idea how you do that. Well, I would really, really like for you to figure that out. If you're running for president, and at the time she wasn't yet running for president, but obviously knew she was going to. Like, if you're worried about the system, mainly she seems to be worried that it's an inconvenience for her, it takes too long, it's tiring, she has to raise too much money, that's a pain in the ass. But even if that's all you cared about and you worry about the system, figure out how to fix it. Don't just go, I have no idea how to do that. That's the most important issue! And she doesn't seem to understand that it's the most important issue at all. And obviously from this, at that point, when she's giving the speeches to the bankers, had no idea how to fix campaign finance reform and hadn't bothered figuring it out. Deeply problematic. Okay, now, I've got more, and it's all in different order. So let's put these are gone. Okay, this is gone. All right, here we go. Here, yeah. Now we're going to start talking about the financial markets. She is giving speeches to the bankers, so let's get into it. She says, now it's important to recognize the vital role that financial markets play in our economy, and that so many of you are contributing to. If you just stop right there, here we go, kissing their ass. You guys are so important. The financial markets, critical role, love you. Thank you for the $225,000 you just gave me for this speech. But don't stop there. Be fair. Do the full context. So she says, so even if it may not be 100% true, if the perception is that somehow the game is rigged, she's talking about that all the way back then, right? That should be a problem for all of us. We have to be willing to make that absolutely clear. And if there are issues, if there's wrongdoing, people have to be held accountable, and we have to try to deter future bad behavior, because the public trust is at the core of both a free market economy and a democracy. Well, when you read it in context, that last part's not so bad at all, okay? And so she's saying, hey, look, a lot of people feel the system is rigged, and we can't let that get out of hand, so we have to fix it. So, look, everybody's always looking to pick sides. Which side are you on? Are you on Hillary's side, or are you against Hillary? So the people for Hillary's side go, oh, this is no big deal. Oh, no big deal. People against Hillary are like, oh my God, nuclear Armageddon, everything is a disaster. We knew it. She's the Beelzebub reincarnated. The reality is, no, there's some good stuff. Actually, yeah, she does defend some progressive positions. So some good stuff in here, some mixed stuff, and some bad stuff. So our job is to figure out which one is which and share it with you. So if you're on one of the sides and you hate me for trying to be fair about this, okay, that's my, of course, interpretation, that I'm being fair about it. Okay, I got it, brother. But for all the rest of you, I'm trying to tell you what's going on. Now, we're getting to the bad stuff right now, and obviously some of that was pretty bad, too. Okay, so she says, when I was a senator from New York, I represented and worked with so many talented principled people who made their living in finance. But even though I represented them and did all I could to make sure they continued to prosper, I called for closing the carried interest loophole and addressing the skyrocketing CEO pay. This one, again, we're on the border. On the one hand, she's like, oh, you talented, wonderful, lovely people that are paying me all this money. You guys are great, and I represented you. On the other hand, she's saying, but don't get me wrong, I'm going to try to address skyrocketing CEO pay. And if she does, in fact, close the carried interest loophole, that would be awesome, because that's horrible. That's a giant way to shift the tax burden onto the middle class instead of having the people at the top pay for it. That loophole is outrageous. If she does close it, that would be great. Mixed bag. Now, she says, part of the problem with the political situation too is that there's such a bias against people who have led successful and or complicated lives. The divestment of assets, the stripping of all kinds of positions, the sale of stocks. It just becomes very onerous and unnecessary. Now she's getting more knee deep in, you successful people, the bankers. And there I think, she's talking to Ursula Burns. In another one, she was talking to Lloyd Blankfein. No, in that case, she's talking to Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs. She talks about Bob Rubin. He was the head of Goldman Sachs. Then he was the Treasury Secretary under Clinton. And gosh, he had to sell some assets to become Treasury Secretary. Yeah, but then he later went back to Citigroup and made a killing as he crashed the economy. I don't feel bad for Bob Rubin. And you don't have to go into that room and be like, oh my gosh, they're punishing the successful and making it so. No, now you're kissing their ass. And that's totally annoying and the wrong mindset. How that affects policy is even more important, which is what we're getting to. So she says, now that was one of the reasons I started traveling in February of 2009, so people could, literally yell at me for the United States and our banking system causing this everywhere, talking about the financial collapse. Now that's an oversimplification, we know, but it was a conventional wisdom. Stop there for a second. It was not an oversimplification. The U.S. banks did cause the crash. There were some international banks, Deutsche Bank, etc., that certainly were exactly part of the same problem. But it is not an oversimplification. It was the banks. They committed fraud, and they puffed up the market. They basically paid off the ratings agencies to make sure that they got good ratings on nonsense, toxic mortgages, and derivatives that they had created. Not an oversimplification. She's totally wrong about that. Okay. She says, and I think there's a lot that could have been avoided in terms of both misunderstanding and really politicizing what happened with greater transparency, with greater openness on all sides. You know what happened. How did it happen? How do we prevent it from happening? You guys help us figure it out, and let's make sure that we do it right this time. See, boom. That to me is the most troubling part of all this. She goes on to say it again in a couple of different ways, which I'll explain. But she's saying right there, well, golly gee, I don't want anybody politicizing and taking advantage of the collapse. No, nobody's that's not the point. The point is, these guys did do fraud. We know it. It's in their emails. They say, we're going to screw over our own customers doing this. We have the emails, right? And they know that they created a bubble, and then they bet against the bubble as it was crashing. We know all that. It is not an oversimplification. And when you say, we need your help in fixing it, you're treating them as if they're good actors. They're like, golly gee, I wonder what happened here. Let's try to figure it out together. Okay, Mr. Robber, tell me how this bank happened to get robbed. And let's try to fix it together. No, he's the one who robbed the bank. He's not going to tell you. Anything he tells you is so that he can rob the bank the next time. But she doesn't see it that way. She sees the Lloyd Blankfeins, the Goldman Sachs, the Citigroups, all these guys as her friend, as her colleague, as someone they could figure things out together with. So along those lines, more quotes like that. She says, today, there's more that can and should be done that really has to come from the industry itself, and how we can strengthen our economy, create more jobs at a time that's increasingly challenging to get back to Teddy Roosevelt's square deal. And I really believe that our country and all of you are up to that job. No, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of what happened in the collapse and how the banking industry works and the relationship between government and business. Those businessmen are not there to help you. They're not there to give you friendly advice on golly gee willikers, how should we run the government most efficiently. They are there to make money. They are there to maximize their profits. And some of the way that they maximize their profits is by committing that wide-scale fraud that we talked about, because in the short term, they get paid huge executive salaries and bonuses on the bubble. And when it crashes, what do? They use you to put all the costs onto all of us. So if you think they're on our team, you have misunderstood the entire equation. They are not on our team, but they are on Hillary Clinton's team. That is why we were against her. That is why progressives are upset with her. And she still doesn't get it because she thinks, oh, you guys are just not moderate. If you just understood that Goldman Sachs is trying to help us, well, then, we wouldn't have any of these problems. They're not from Goldman Sachs and here to help you. Understandably and somewhat rationally, they're here to help themselves. That is why we must rationally fix the campaign finance system so that they cannot buy our politicians and give themselves unfair advantages, so that when they crash, we bail them out. All right, last one. She says, the people that know the industry better than anybody are the people who work in the industry. In other words, guys, if we're going to go fix the financial markets, and I'm giving a speech here for $225,000 to Goldman Sachs or other bankers, well, the people I should come to for the solution are you guys, the bankers. No. You should find a solution. It doesn't mean you have to pulverize the bankers. It doesn't mean you have to be unfair. It doesn't mean you have to politicize it. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. It just means you have to find the real solution. And if you want to find the real solution to a banking problem, you don't just go ask the bankers, hey guys, how'd you like to fix the problem you created? Right? They're not going to give you an honest answer. They're going to say, well, you know what, if you deregulate us, I think that might be the right way to go. And by the way, if we crash again, if the whole world economy depends on you bailing us out, so whatever you do, I would bail us out. And of course that's what they told her. And that's exactly what the Obama administration did, the Bush administration. That's at the heart of these transcripts. Now, the reality is, kind of already knew that was her position. So that's why I say she should have just released the transcripts and just raised her hand and been honest. I'm a moderate. I think maybe you control CEO pay and you close the carried interest loophole, but I generally trust the bankers. I know, that sounds pretty bad. Maybe she shouldn't say she trusts the bankers, but she does. You can tell there. She trusts them to look out for our interests, and that's not how it works. Our representatives are supposed to represent us and look out for our interests. The bankers can look out for themselves. So, no matter what your thoughts are on whether she should have released it or not, understand the full context. Don't buy into it's just all terrible and boogeyman. But also, when you do understand the full context, there's plenty of pretty bad stuff in there. So, bottom line is, this is like 32 days before the election. So everybody's like, who are you going to vote? What does that mean? Who should you vote for? Sure, of course, that's for you to decide, right? That all that stuff doesn't mean that she's worse than the incompetent, bigoted lunatic called Donald Trump. But it also does mean, if you're a real progressive and you don't think that the bankers have the answers, and you do have an idea of how to get the money out of politics, that you should just trust Hillary Clinton. No, if she wins, you should start the fight against her on day one. It's not because it's personal, it's not because she's particularly evil. It's because, as you can tell from these transcripts, she still doesn't get it. She doesn't understand the importance of getting the money out, and she still thinks her really wealthy colleagues who have been giving money to her all this time have the answers, and that if she just trusts them, they're the smart people. Don't demagogue, don't be, trust the American people or anything like that. They're angry, but they're oversimplifying. Let me go ask the bankers what they think. That is wrong. She has the wrong mindset. It isn't that I dislike her, it isn't that it's personal. It's that if you keep thinking that way, you're not going to get to the right answer, and you will crash the economy again, and we can't have that. So, real progressives, buckle up, because if she gets into office, if we don't change that mindset, nothing's going to get fixed. That's the reality, and that's all.